Hi and welcome to Conversations with Robyn. On today's program we have Sonia Choquette, and amongst many things Sonia is an international intuitive teacher, guide and author. Please welcome Sonia.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
It's a pleasure.
It is so great to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are so welcome. Before we find out what you do and your journey, how would you introduce what you do?
Well, it is a little awkward because what I do isn't common, and there's not even necessarily a word in our language that fully encompasses what I do. Mm-hmm. But I've coined a word. I've actually trademarked a word. I'm a sixth sensory. And a sixth sensory is someone who, among other things, I am very articulate in my intuitive abilities, not just for myself, but for others. I am also very effective in teaching people, as well as using the skills of manifestation. So I can teach people how to create effectively. Because I have learned how to use energy efficiently, and what I do is teach others how to use energy efficiently. I change vibration, I raise vibration, and I help people flow more smoothly with life. It helps them become healthier, less stressed, more creative, more joyful, more peaceful. So there's a whole constellation of shifts that happen when you go from being a five sensory person to a six sensory person. And my mission in life is to teach people how to walk across that bridge.
And you've had an amazing journey, haven't you, to get to where you are with your mission in life?
Well, I have. I've basically, a lot of people ask me, when did you first realize you were intuitive or psychic? Mm-hmm. And I never realized it per se, but I did realize when I started school that what was perfectly obvious and apparent to me and normal in my home, my family, was not shared by those that I went to school with. And as I got a little further into school, I was shocked to realize that what I considered my natural and most important gifts, other people perceived as weird or unnatural or unholy. And so it really threw me for a spin early on and actually made me angry. And so I've devoted the earlier part of my life to studying and learning about why people became separated from our natural, most important instincts. I mean, we are born with six senses, not five. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I've been doing this for 35 years. So fortunately, science is catching up with what I know. And so now it is actually acknowledged scientifically that we have six senses. And the new question is no longer does it exist. The new question, and the one I've devoted myself to answering, is how does it work? I teach people how it works and get it working for them. Can
you describe it? I mean, you know, obviously we've got enough time to go more in depth, but just in a nutshell, can you describe how it works?
Well, sure. We have a spirit that basically gives us consciousness in life. What serves our spirit, Einstein said it really well, the intuitive spirit is a sacred gift. The rational mind, its faithful servant. But unfortunately, most people have thrown away the gift and have become enslaved to the servant. So what I do is I remind people that the intuitive spirit is your gift, it's your essence, it's who you really are, it's your authentic voice. It lives in the heart. It reverberates out and gets your attention through your emotions, through your senses, through your sensory awareness. You experience it as vibration because it's actually energy communicating. It's not one size fits all. Some of us feel that vibration in our heart. Some of us feel it in our throat. Some of us feel it like a rumbling in our gut. Some of us feel it like the hair on your arm standing up or the back of your neck, but we all feel it some way. And that vibration or that energy, if you pay attention to it, brings information. It will warn you, it will alert you, it will bring your attention to opportunity. It will encourage you or discourage you based on the nature of the conditions around you, and inform you about life in a more accurate way than just your five senses can. This is your spirit. So to activate this sixth sense, the first thing that has to occur is you have to begin to understand that you are spirit. And as spirit, you're not confined to any finite place or any temporary personality. You have access to all the energy of the universe. And some of my peers in the realm of quantum physics explains that really well, but I'm not a quantum physicist, so I just basically say, as spirit, we have access to all that is of the spirit world. And it's a matter of first acknowledging that you're spirit, and then secondly, cultivating a conversation with your spirit, cultivating an awareness of your spirit. And the first thing I ask people when I teach with them is I ask them, where does your spirit live? Do you know?
And where do most people say?
Well, universally, and I've been around the world, they'll go to their heart.
Mm.
My spirit lives in my heart, and that's accurate.
Mm. It's an automatic instinct, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. We are naturally hardwired to be conscious in the heart. And science has actually proven that we have neural ganglion that go to the brain and also to the heart, and actually to the gut as well, that give us information. And then I'll say, and where does your spirit move? Mm. And that's confusing for people.
Where does it move?
In your hips. You make your decisions in your hips. This is
the
where
solar plexus.
Right. This is where you'll either move with your vibration, move with your gut, move with your instincts, or not. Mm-hmm. You might. The alternative, and what most people do, unfortunately, is they'll go up to their head and become frozen. Mm-hmm. And the minute you're in your head, you've lost connection to your spirit, and you've lost your ability to be fully and authentically informed. So I teach people to get back to your spirit and take care of your spirit. You know, you can tell if someone's spirit is left. Do you know how you can tell?
I was listening to a Wayne Dyer tape this morning. He was talking about that.
You can tell. I can tell immediately.
How do you tell?
By the light in your eyes.
Yeah, that's what he said.
If there's no light in your eyes, your spirit's gone. Mm. And a lot of people definitely push their spirit out and get stuck in their ego and control, and their lives just become a series of managing their fears, and they've lost all their capacity to be creative or responsive or intuitive or spontaneous, and they've lost all their capacity to be joyful.
Well, just on that, because what he was talking about, he said if someone has like a huge shock, a huge loss, someone dying, and they feel shattered, it's like their spirit, their soul, their heart's being shattered, and their soul leaves the body.
Temporarily.
That's what he's saying, temporarily, but you can tell by looking in the eyes.
Yeah. Now, there's really simple ways to wake up your spirit.
Okay.
One of them, and the most obvious one, is to breathe. Mm-hmm. Do you know that most people don't breathe? Yeah. And there's a way to breathe. There's a specific way to breathe to activate your spirit, which is to breathe in through the nose, and then out through the mouth and let out the sound, ah. Mm-hmm. If you do that, you open up the chimney to the heart. Ah, this is where we lose where we become muted. This is where we lose our intuition. Most people have still a pretty strong sense of intuition, but they choke it off and they don't express it. So, changes your vibration right away and centers you back in your heart. And that works. Another thing to do is to sing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can't be in your head and sing at the same time. Yeah. Singing is a faculty of the heart, of the spirit. So even if you sing something like "Row, row, row your boat," it'll get you out of your head. Yeah. It'll get you out of your head, and so that's another tool. Another tool that will get you back into your spirit is to move. Mm-hmm. When you're in your intellect or in your head, you freeze.
Yeah, it's been stuck.
You stop breathing, you stop moving. And it's interesting to me how many people don't want to move. They lose touch with movement, but your spirit is fire. And fire moves.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And we're going to get back to that because we're going to take a break and we'll come back and hear a lot more from Sonia. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we're having a very interesting conversation with Sonia Choquette. Before the break, we're talking about how to bring our spirit back into our body. And we spoke about breathing, singing, moving.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are 3 things that are really pretty effective. In fact, Albert Einstein was asked once how he discovered the theory of relativity. And he said, I wasn't looking for it. I was listening to music and singing, and the whole thing dropped into my head.
Okay, downloaded.
So when you're in your spirit, your heart opens. And then you become receptive to being inspired. You become receptive to guidance. Many people say, I don't hear my guidance, I don't know left from right, I don't know, how do I know? But my first question to them is, well, how guidable are you? Because your intuition is subtle, and it's not going to fight or compete with your controlling intellect. So now we have to figure out what to do with our controlling intellect. You don't want to get rid of it. It's your faithful servant. But it has to serve the spirit. So I think a really effective way is to consider your personality, your ego, like your pet, your beloved pet.
Now that's an interesting
Well, you can love your pet, but you have to train your pet.
Yeah.
You have to train your pet to sit down and be quiet and listen, behave.
Depends on your pet.
Right, because if your pet's out of control, poops all over your house, you're not gonna enjoy your pet.
And people often say the pet runs the household.
Right. So if your pet's running the household, you can be sure that your spirit is also being chased away. So I say one of the ways to train your pet is to meditate. And you know, that word is still extremely intimidating to people. People don't like that word, actually, because that means an assignment that's bigger than I can succeed.
So how would you?
So I say, first of all, let's frame meditation correctly. It's like having a drink at the well. It's just a temporary pause in your mental chaos to relax and step out of the theater of life and regroup. And one of the best ways to meditate, and a quick way to meditate, here's a very quick, effective way to meditate. Well, first let's back up a minute. Meditation, the goal of meditation is to bring you to your spirit and bring you to present time.
Yes.
Your emotional self lives in the past. Your mental self lives in the future.
Okay.
And you can't create or be intuitive in the past or the future. You can only be creative and you can only be intuitively guided in the moment.
In the present moment, yep.
So a very quick, easy, simple way to meditate yourself back to the moment is a form of mindful meditation where you just take a look around, and as you breathe, you start naming what you see. You name it. You can't just think it, though. You can say, I see a beautiful brown sofa. I see a beige pillow. I see your lovely aubergine pants. I see your necklace. I see my gray dress. And you just do that for 3 minutes. And when you're finished, you'll be completely present. Your mind will be quiet, your pet will be sleeping, and your spirit will be present. And you can then put your hand over your heart and say, now my intuition says, and it will speak.
And it's there.
It's so simple.
When you word it that way, it is so simple.
And it's a technique that will not fail anybody. So my whole purpose in life is to give you techniques and tools that will work. Your intuitive spirit should be leading your life. It is really not natural that it isn't. You know, you think about birds have radar, and whales have sonar. They can cross oceans, and monarch butterflies can fly from one continent to the next and back and end up exactly where they left. Why not us? Why would we be any less capable of having an inner guidance system that is perfect for our greatest flowering, our greatest potential fulfillment, our greatest creative expression? And for us to treat it as something weird or unnatural is perhaps one of our most devastating decisions.
And the most that separates.
Well, I say
us
to
from
people,
the divine and each other.
honestly, if you lost every one of your senses, but your intuition worked, you'd be okay. But if you had every sense and your intuition was dormant, I wouldn't be so sure. And one of my favorite examples of that is Helen Keller.
Why?
Because she had lost all her senses. She couldn't see, she couldn't speak, she couldn't hear. She barely had the capacity to sense and feel, and yet by following and expressing her spirit, she became one of the most inspirational people of all time and touched the world.
I didn't realize she'd lost most of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Most everything.
Wow.
So I think it's time for us to begin to wake up. We've been dumbed down. To begin to re-educate ourselves about our intuition and to move out of the dark ages and the witch burnings and all the other crazy ideologies that people have been subjected to, and begin to re-embrace our natural wisdom as a divine right. And frankly, I think we should use it as our first sense, not our sixth sense.
I agree. Where do you think we are then as a species on this planet?
Well, here's where I think. Basically, the ratio right now is about 22% sixth sensory, 78% five sensory. However, we don't have to get to 100% to be okay. We only have to get to 51% because of the laws of the tipping point. When there are 51% of us human beings operating from the paradigm of spirit, it's contagious. We influence one another energetically. And so just the people watching this show right now, if they made that decision to reconnect with their spirit, to start listening to their authentic inner voice and trusting it, to being spontaneous and give up control, do you know that that is enough numbers of people to bring us to the tipping point? It doesn't take a lot.
And it's actually quite simple, isn't it?
Absolutely.
At the end of the day.
And it's contagious. Human
monkey.
beings, we are definitely responsive beings, and for everyone who's operating at a sixth sensory vibration, it's a higher frequency. It's more positive, it's happier, it's more creative, your heart opens, your blood pressure goes down, your joy comes up. So you can just be walking through a room and start jump-starting that for those around you. And it's inevitable. It's the natural way.
I absolutely. Well, it's going back to who we are, isn't it? It's reclaiming.
And it's reclaiming the feminine.
Yes.
Now, I'm not talking about reclaiming women, because we're all a balance of male, female, but it's reclaiming our feminine side. It's reclaiming our connection to the earth. And here's the best thing about being six sensory. In the five sensory paradigm, when you work out of the ego, you work out of a paradigm that's fearful, because the ego will always be insecure. It will never be loved enough. It will never be safe enough. It will never be secure enough.
Oh, it sounds so...
It won't.
Poor thing.
The ego won't.
Oh.
The ego will never, ever, ever be secure enough to give up control.
So it's like that demanding pet,
right,
little child or whatever.
But the minute you go to your spirit, you're always comfortable. You're always safe. You're not seeking approval because you know you're divine. So your heart can open and you can become loving and generous. So the paradigm of the ego is me against you. And the paradigm of the spirit is me and you. And in the physical body, me against you is called cancer. And so we six sensories who come to say there's no them, there's just us. Just because there's only one spirit, just like there's only one fire. We're all spirit, you and I. And the minute you begin to connect with that, you're not afraid anymore. So you don't have to keep up your defenses and manage and control. You can actually pay attention to what's in front of you, and your heart can open, and you can begin to enjoy and experience the beauty and the love and the positivity of the planet. And that's our natural design. And so I think our time has come. I really do. I think it's time for six sensory awareness to be mainstreamed. And that's my mission. That's what I've been doing for 35 years, or better, actually, a little more. But it is what we are here to do.
Well, it's also what Conversations with Robyn is about.
Right.
Absolutely part of that. We'll take another break, and we'll come back and find out more about Sonia's personal journey to why she does what she does in the world. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us, and we're having a fantastic conversation with Sonia Choquette. Sonia, before the break, we're talking about the tipping point.
Right.
Yep. Now, what I'd love to, before moving back onto that, is talk a little bit about your personal journey. Because you've written how many books now?
14.
14. Okay. What number was this one, Diary of a Psychic?
That was number 7.
Okay.
But it should have been the first.
Interesting, isn't it, that it wasn't?
Well, actually, I had always intended it to be the first, but I put out some other books first and then came around to that, and I think it made sense to me later, but it's the one I think people should start with first.
Yeah. Well, saying to you earlier, would love it if every kid around 11, 12 read this.
I think so.
It's such an easy read, honestly, and if you're fascinated with what we're talking about here, I absolutely recommend getting it. It's one of the easiest read books that I've read. Just talking a little bit about this, one of the things that came out was your mum.
Well,
And how she...
right. You know, people ask me, and have all the time, how did you become so comfortably as connected to your intuition? And I really believe that the gift I had was not that I was endowed with anything unique or particular, but I was raised in an environment that was set by my mother, where intuition was considered absolutely the most important sense. And the reason for that is that when she was a child, she was caught up in the war, World War II. As a 12-year-old, she separated from her family in an evacuation. She lost touch with her family, and she ended up being put in a prison of war camp. She was marched across Hungary for 11 days and 11 nights with all these other prisoners, and they were not allowed to speak, and they were not allowed to in any way communicate. And she said the fear was palpable. Everyone was just terrified, and when she looked around, the only thing she saw coming back at her was, it's over, you're going to die. And something inside of her rebelled. And she said, it was my spirit. And my spirit said, just listen to me, just follow me, you'll be okay. And she said, I had a choice. I could go with what appeared, but it promised death or not. So she said, maybe it was just survival on a colossal level. But I decided to go with my spirit.
At 12 years old?
At 12 years old. She said, that's all I had.
Yeah.
So that feisty spirit of hers.
What handed down?
When she was in the prison of war camp, they decided to ship her off to Odessa. And her spirit said no. And as the train was picking up momentum, she noticed all of a sudden as she looked around that in one split second, No one was watching her, and she happened to be in front of a door, and she jumped off the train.
Really?
She decided, if I'm going to go, I'll go on my own terms.
Yeah.
Well, she survived.
Wow.
And she hid in a barn. She eventually got turned back in, but by then things had settled. She'd worked for a short period of time for a cook in one of the Nazi quarters, and she said, you know, it wasn't a bad life considering my alternatives. So she used her vibes, and when the cook would leave, she would pay attention to the energy, and she'd snitch food. She said, at first it was a piece of bread and cheese, and then, you know, I got really good when I'd go for the chocolate. Well, she ended up being liberated at 15, and she saw, they all lived. She said all of us, the Germans, the prisoners, we were all in the same playing field because there was nothing. And we had to use our vibes to survive. So she used hers to gather wood in the forest, and she would sell it to the Gasthaus, the restaurant, and they would give her food. Well, one day her spirit, when she was coming home, said that the American soldier in town was going to be her boyfriend. And she shared that information with her fellow prisoner of war, liberated prisoners of war, and they laughed at her. And they said, look at you, you sleep in a barn, you smell like a horse, you wear mixed army shoes. And she said it was the first time someone had challenged her. And she said it angered her and said, you mark my words. Well, a few weeks later, she was coming back from the forest. It had just rained, and she was bringing the wood back, and sure enough, there was that soldier. He's coming down the road in a Jeep, and he drove right in front of her and splattered her with mud and kept on going, and oh, she was furious. So she picked up a stick of wood and ran after him and yelled, who do you think you are? Well, fast forward, that man is my father.
And the father of your 6 brothers and sisters.
And my father,
yeah.
and they have been married to this day 62 years. So obviously her vibes worked out.
Absolutely.
You know, she suffered a lot. She even lost her hearing during the war. So I grew up with a mother who was not able to hear. She had only been educated till she was 14, and that was in the prison and war camp. And yet she was extremely gifted, and she gave us a message when we were little. No matter what appears and no matter how bad it looks, you have a spirit, and your spirit talks to you through your vibes. So always trust your vibes. And that was our marching orders. That was our mantra. She said, we will be taken care of if we trust our vibes, but if we listen to our fears, we have no, she said, I can make no guarantees. If you trust your vibes. And you know, my life has been very magical, as have the lives of my siblings, and has the lives of my students. It is a universal truth.
Well, one of the things that you talk about in the book is that we all have 33, is it?
33 spirit guides.
Would you like to share a bit about that with us?
Well, people wonder what that's like. You know, spirit guides are those, one person said, was that puppets in the sky telling us what to do? And not at all. First of all, think about the word guide. A guide is a source of support and encouragement. And it's like if you have a coach on the court in a basketball team, he's going to give you tips and suggestions, but he's not going to come out there and take the ball for you.
True.
Now, as spirit, why wouldn't we be connected to the spirit world? Now, guides for me were very easy to assimilate because I was raised Catholic. And in the Catholic world, we were told that we had angels and saints, and we prayed to the dearly departed. And in my home, we even actually left a chair at the table and set the table every day for whoever might be passing through. So it was normal that if you're in spirit, you would commune with spirit. And the spirit world wants to help. However, guide is not do it for you. And a lot of reasons people don't connect with their guides is because they want their guides to take over and tell them what to do. And that would be robbing you of your free will. So guides are subtle and make suggestions. Guides are not intended to take over, and if that's what you want your guides to do, they can't. But if you're open to suggestion, like I say, how guidable are you? Here's a very quick anecdote to just wonder. One day I was driving to school to pick up my children, They were at preschool. They're 2 and 3 years old. I'm driving to pick them up in a snowstorm in Chicago, and all of a sudden my guide said, turn. So I turned, and I didn't know where I was going. And I'm thinking, this is interesting. My children are waiting for me, but I was told to turn. So I go a few more blocks, and I'm completely open, wondering what's next. And my guide say, turn again. And I turned again. Now I'm 6 blocks away from school and running late, but I'm going with it. And as I come to the corner, and it's a big blizzard coming because we live right off the lake, and that makes snow effect, down the street comes running a little baby in a diaper, completely alone, no socks, no shoes, nothing, by herself. That's why my guide told me to turn.
Yes.
So I scooped her up, parked my car, and walked with her for 6 more blocks till I found an open door. And I found that the babysitter was watching TV and she escaped. Now, my kids were waiting for me.
Yeah.
What would you have done?
Exactly what you did.
See, now that's where I say, how guidable are you? Because my teachers taught me, and I write about my teachers in Diary of a Psychic, the minute you stop and think about it, you've lost your moment. And to live an intuitive life, you have to be very spontaneous. That's why you have to move, so that you're movable, so that you can go with the flow instead of fight it or intellectually struggle with it, which a lot of people do.
In that instance, probably what you did, but maybe not in other instances, there was also, we're just going to go for another break, but there was also an instance that you talking about that reminded me about your dad when he took a different way to work, where your brother...
Right.
Yeah, we'll chat about that after the break. It gets even more interesting. See you soon. Thank you for staying with us. And Sonia, before the break, we're just mentioning about you're being guided and that little tyke, and then the fact that it's a section in your book about your dad.
Right.
Can you just share that?
Well, Diary of a Psychic is I wrote the story about growing up psychic, so that people would see how normal it is, and that we all have those moments. We just, in most cases, when you're not intuitive or following your vibes, you just make different decisions. Well, I grew up in a city in Colorado, Denver, where we were the Catholics, and then there was the public school, and then we had our, kind of our wars, and we were really not supposed to walk by the public school. Well, I have an older brother who was very provocative and always was getting in trouble and asking for trouble, really, and one day he went, sure enough, walking by the public school, and some public school kids confronted him, and he refused to move. And I got the vibes to go following him, and I see him surrounded, and I freak out because I see my brother about to get pummeled to death by a bunch of bullies, and I threw myself on the ground and started praying.
How old would you have been?
I was 8.
Yep.
He was 9. I was just praying not to see my brother annihilated. And just then, out of the blue, like coming from out of the sky, comes my dad, who was at home for lunch and decided, rather than to just drive back to work, got the sudden impulse to drive the same street that my brother was surrounded by. So he gravitates and pulls his car over, opens the door, gets out, and he's like this very benign man, actually, but he was a boxer in the Army. So he kind of gets out and he goes, "What's the problem?" The bullies scattered. We get in the car, and I'm like, "Oh, thank God, thank God." And my brother is like, "What? What's the big deal?" And I couldn't believe it. And I said, "Why did you come?" And my dad said, "Even I get the vibe once in a while." But that's just it's, the point of the Diary of a Psychic is that it's really not a big deal. It's a bunch of little deals that if you listen and follow and connect and integrate with the spirit world and pray and ask for help and listen and go with the flow, your life becomes very charmed.
Well, then that probably leads me on to your latest book, which is soul lessons and soul purpose.
Yes.
Because if someone's sitting out there watching this now and they say, that's great, you know, you had a mum who was psychically developed, so
Lucky
how do
me,
I
right.
do it? Yeah, how do I do it? Now, would it be fair to say this is the book?
This is the book, because I have nothing special. We are all, it's like if one flower gets the sun, it will blossom, and the others may stay dormant. But the minute they also get the sun, they'll blossom too. So this book you might consider like the sun.
Yep.
To help your spirit flourish. And there was a big best-selling movie out last year, and book called The Secret. And it was very good. Incomplete.
Okay.
But very good.
Why was it, I sometimes ask this question, why do you think it was incomplete?
Well, first of all, I think it was brilliant because we learn in bits and pieces. You can't give everybody too much at once.
Yeah.
But what it did do is capture our imaginations and remind us universally that we are creators. Now, the next step, which is where we come to soul lessons, is it's not your ego that creates. It's only your spirit that creates. Your ego, well, I take that back. Your ego can create one thing very well, frustration.
Okay.
But your spirit can create satisfaction, creativity, it can manifest health, joy, love, most of all, peace of mind. So this book is just some of the other pieces. And what I love about this book is it's a channeled book. It was my guide's Joachim that came through that I talk about. And it talks about the learning curve, not just the lesson, but that we learn in different stages: student, apprentice, journeyman, master. And it puts the lesson out very simply, then helps you assess where you are in the learning curve. If you're a student, it feels this way. If you're an apprentice, it'll feel this way. And if you're a journeyman, this way, and master this way. And then what to do relative to where you are on the learning curve. So you can read this book and say, you know, I know half of that stuff. It's just the other half I have to work on. So it shows us we are all learning. No one is an absolute beginner across the board. No one. We are learning. This just helps us fine-tune it and accelerate it so that we can learn a little more quickly and have a little more immediate satisfaction and move away from some of that frustration and fear that I think is the infection, the virus of five sensory consciousness, of fear and control. It helps us kind of pop out of that, and it makes you immune. Not only that, soul lessons will not only give you your voice and your power back, it endows you to be the next teacher and the next healer. And in that regard, we all help one another.
So it's back to that tipping point again.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I really believe that we're going to see that tipping point in the next 5 years.
I was going to ask you that question earlier.
I do.
So
I think that, to me, the
2012,
that's the tipping point.
Okay, the Mayan calendar, 2012.
Well, what that is the end of patriarchy.
Is that your spin on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the end of male-dominated consciousness.
Yeah. And you're not saying male per se either, are you?
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I'm
just to
as male
clarify.
as any male. I mean, in a way, we all are. We're
Absolutely.
a blend.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it's the end of the strictly intellectual, externalized God control. And it is the beginning of the integrated, feminine, nurturing face of God. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Good.
I am. A lot of people are very scared and say, oh, it's the end. Of course it's the end. But do you know that's what the butterfly says in the cocoon before it busts out?
That's true.
And the other thing is, do you know that it almost kills a butterfly to get out of a cocoon?
No.
But it's the same effort that gives it the power to fly.
Really? I didn't know that.
The struggle almost kills it, but it also gives it. So we're in a struggle. And I think it's an important struggle, but I feel like we're in a birth canal right now.
Well, that's another question. This is great. You just answered the question. Say, it's your psychic thing. Though.
Yeah, that's right.
Just remove me from the cameras. Seriously, where are we at now?
Well, I feel like we are in a transition point. I actually feel that people collectively are beginning to sense that the paradigm and the way we're going about life is woefully inadequate. They're more receptive now than they've ever been. We are also going to become more actively conscious of the things that don't work, like, for example, global warming, like, for example, me against you.
Well, let's get back to global warming. Now, you get some of the scientists saying, yes, this is definitely happening, and some of them say, nah, this is just a whole bunch of media propaganda.
No, it's definitely happening, and you don't really have to listen to the scientists. Just look at nature and see what's happening. Just, scientists don't have to give you information. Look at our experience. The hurricanes are coming at you know, exponential force. There's tsunamis happening. There are ice caps melting. So I would say, don't ask the scientists. Go outside and ask yourself, what do you think?
And do one's own little bit.
Every single one of us. Gandhi liberated India with his own one little bit. Abraham Lincoln liberated the slaves in America with his little bit, and he was mentally ill. But he still listened to his spirit.
In what way mentally ill?
He was depressed. He had mental illness. It is a documented fact.
Okay. Didn't know that. Well, that actually leads me on to another question. People who are diagnosed with, for example, schizophrenia. Now, is it really a mental illness, or is it the fact that they are very... It's a soul fracture. Can you explain that?
What I see, and actually I have a brother who's schizophrenic, so I've been very closely connected to schizophrenia. It's a soul fracture. It's that some part of the soul is not fully integrated into this reality, and it can happen for a lot of reasons. It can be genetic, it can be brought on by drug abuse, it can be the whole combination. But even if you have schizophrenia, if you begin to realign with your spirit, you can begin to find a way to live healthily enough, using, of course, the medications, because your biology is not conducive to holding the spirit anymore. But my brother is schizophrenic, and he has a very happy, grounded, healthy life. He needs help. He needs medication, but he's also very intuitive and very lucid, and he says that his problem was he was just a little bit too psychic.
And I'd like to ask a bit more about that when we come back. Stay with us for the last part of our conversation with Sonia. Thank you for staying with us, and we're in the last part of our conversation with Sonia. Before the break, Sonia, we're talking about schizophrenia and how do we tell... What was the question I was going to ask?
How do we distinguish?
Thank you. Yep.
Between, and that's a very good question. How do we distinguish between what is guidance from our higher self and positive angelic influences versus wishful thinking versus negative guides, which are also out there? I actually explain that a great deal in Diary of a Psychic, because in that book I take the reader to school with me. And I teach them how I learned. I share with them how I learned, how I went to see my teachers, from my mother, from my teachers. But in a simple nutshell, like I said earlier in our conversation, there's only one spirit. So good guidance, worthwhile guidance, is guidance that's not just good for you, but good for all concerned. It won't separate you. It won't make you special. It won't flatter you. It won't isolate you. Good guidance will open your heart, will help you become a more loving world citizen, will help you become more tolerant, more forgiving, more patient, more creative, more understanding. Good guidance will elevate your consciousness and help help build bridges instead of burn bridges, whereas flattery, or what my teachers called riffraff guidance, is isolating and flattering and divisive, and you can just throw that out. That's not going to help you. Anything that will be worthwhile for you would be, and also it'll be worthwhile for everyone and can be scrutinized. Good guidance you can share with anyone and have no reason to hide it.
Okay.
And so those are some just real concrete ways. And how do you get in touch with that guidance? Hand on your heart, breathe in and say, my spirit says, and fill in the blank.
Okay. Well, speaking of guidance, I asked you before we started the filming, Will any of your guides be here with us?
Well, actually, all my guides were here. And I have, in particular, 3 beautiful guides called the 3 Bishops.
Yes.
They're teachers.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones that are sort of answering your questions before you ask them. Those are my spirit guides. And then I always have Rose present, whom I believe is Saint Teresa.
Really?
But she wants to be called Rose. And she looks, in my mind's eye, like Saint Teresa. And she is such a loving force and has always been with me. And my connection to her is whenever I touch people or whenever I'm with people, I convey the vibration of unconditional love. So people remember that they're beautiful and that there is no need to get approval. There's just the need to remember that they were breathed into creation by God and that God takes delight in you. And so Rose really works with me a lot in helping reawaken that love and appreciation of self that so many people have had in one way or another really taken away from them. And I think that is the biggest reason our world is so unhappy.
Well, I won't ask you to go into this particular next bit because this is our last segment because I'd like to ask some other questions. But there's an amazing story here where Rose so guided you, otherwise you may have taken another pathway.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we can leave that as a cliffhanger for them.
Absolutely. Grab the book and have a read because that was really powerful. Let's just say there's someone out there now watching this chat with you, and they're going, give me a break. Guides,
that would be your ego.
Yeah.
I would say that would be your ego, in which case, ask yourself if that ego is doing anything for you.
Okay.
Are you happy? Do you feel secure? Do you feel loved? Are you peaceful? Is your heart open? Are you fulfilling your purpose? Are you bringing light to the world? If so, then turn the TV off. But if not, I am really not asking you to believe me. I am just suggesting you try a few of these things and do something really radical and actually trust your own spirit. That's my message. I am not working on a campaign of any promotion. My message is take it home, ask yourself, is this working for me? And if not, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and think you're going to get a different result. So I'm just suggesting there's some other things to try, and besides what I suggest is fun. It's harmless. And if anybody has any real resistance, the one thing I do invite people to reassume is responsibility, not just for their own happiness, but for the effect they bring to the planet. And that's something that a lot of people would just as soon be unconscious about. However, our planet can no longer support that unconsciousness. So I just say, time to get with the program.
Part of the problem or part of the solution.
Right. Yeah. Do you bring light or do you bring confusion?
Yeah. Okay.
So, and it's interesting, as I work with a lot of businesses, and there was an interview done with the top 100 CEOs of the world. They were asked, what do they attribute their success to? And universally, all 100 said, my intuition, my sixth sense. But they also said, I don't advertise that. I keep that to myself. And I think it's time we start advertising it.
Hugely.
It's the best kept secret out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's time for everyone's benefit and that's why I loved the movie, The Secret. I loved the book. And I'd say, just know that's the beginning, not the end.
Yeah. Okay. What would be some of the common questions that you're asked?
Is everybody psychic? Absolutely. We're all hardwired. Yep. In fact, you can go to a website called WebMD, type in Sixth Sense, and you'll get all kinds of information about where it is in your body for the skeptics who are watching. Can I trust my vibes? If you're honest, yes. If you're willing to be responsible, yes. If you are willing to live in the present, yes, but otherwise, if you're in the past or the future, trying to manage the world from there, no. So you have to practice that little technique. What will this do for me? It'll improve your life across the board. First, you'll feel better in your own skin. Second, your connection with other people will improve, and you'll be actually able to understand and appreciate everyone for who they are, so you'll make instantly better friendships. Third, you'll be unburdened. You won't have to rescue everybody. You'll know that we're all spirits, so everybody's okay. You don't have to protect and defend and be codependent. That means you're freed up to be more creative. So you can start getting back to the things you abandoned when you were a child. And you can stretch time, because when you live in present time, it expands. When you live in the past or the future, it contracts. And just generally, you can become part of the solution, so your sense of purpose will be fulfilled. And believe it or not, you'll start loving your life. So those are the benefits, if you're so inclined to experiment.
We've got to go. What would be one last thing, if you looked at the camera and just said to the viewers, one last message to them?
The one my mother gave me. Always trust your vibes, expect good things, and you will live a charmed life.
Sonia, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
We'll get you back again.
It's a great pleasure.
Thank you.